Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. It's time for our new show this week in Israel, where we'll give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right from Tel Aviv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, here to keep you informed.
There is tragic and breaking news in the Golan Heights right now. An emergency investigation has been underway after an IDF soldier went missing last night, but now, unfortunately, his body has just been found dead. A major search was being performed in the Katzrin region of the Regional Heights. Damn it. Just from the voice in. From the voice in is fine. Me voice in, Zabasel. Okay. A major search was being performed in the Katzrin region of the Golan Heights, believed to be the last place the soldier was seen alive. Apparently, he'd left his unit during an unspecified military activity last night and hadn't been seen for nearly 24 hours. The investigation has taken a tragic turn for the worst, and although details remain unclear about what led to his death, the soldier's family has been notified already. The Army has launched an open investigation into the matter, but for now, this is the latest. The United Nations has over 10,000 troops in South Lebanon right now, tasked with maintaining peace in the region following the rise of Hezbollah. Now, after months of debate on whether or not to expand that mission, there's been a critical vote, and it looks like they'll be extending efforts to keep illegal weapons out of Hezbollah's hands. This is a major win for Israel, who have been fiercely critical of UNIFIL and the Security Council for being too soft on Hezbollah over the years. But now the thousands of UN troops will be granted widened powers. They're now allowed to physically enter villages where Hezbollah cells operate and take all necessary options at their own discretion. The mandate passed with a unanimous show of hands to the relief of Israeli and American ambassadors.
We have to be honest. For too long, UNIFIL's leadership has failed to make sure this goal is realized. In particular, UNIFIL Commander General Berry's lack of understanding of the threat Hezbollah poses to the region is baffling. At the direction of its patron, Iran, the terrorist organization Hezbollah is stockpiling an offensive arsenal in southern Lebanon. They have thousands of missiles and thousands of trained fighters, all beyond the control of the Lebanese government. It is apparent to everyone who cares to see it.
The United Nations Security Council has given the new resolution the official okay, which means the decision is to take effect immediately. This comes on the heels of UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' 3-day visit to Israel and the Palestinian territories, where he met with leaders on both sides of the conflict, hoping to find a path to peace between them. Though clearly Guterres has heard Prime Minister Netanyahu's plans to expand UN presence in Lebanon, Guterres has just called on both Israel and Egypt to open the blockade against Gaza. The UN chief just spoke in Gaza, asking the Palestinian world to come together and pursue a peaceful two-state solution.
For many years of contact with this conflict, I've had a dream to see the Holy Land with two states, Israel and Palestine, living in peace and security together.
Jared Kushner has just led President Trump's peace envoy and met with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in hopes of bringing peace to the Middle East once and for all. The stakes are very high for these talks, which have already faced some serious hurdles after Palestinians questioned Trump's own disorganized White House administration. After meeting with the King of Egypt to open the floor for peace talks, Jared Kushner landed in Israel to meet directly with Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Very pleased to see you again, Jared, with your delegation. We have a lot of things to talk about. How to advance peace, stability, and security in our region, prosperity too. And I think all of them are within our region.
That same day, Team Trump traveled to Ramallah to meet with leaders from the other side, including Palestinian Authority President Abbas. The Palestinians have been wary about the Trump administration's Middle East policy in the weeks leading up to this meeting, especially concerned that Trump has so far not been on the record about supporting a two-state solution or freezing new Israeli settlements. But things seemed cautiously optimistic in the room.
نرحب بالوفد الأمريكي برئاسة السيد جيراد كوشنر من أجل عمل السلام بين الفلسطينيين والإسرائيليين، ونقدر عاليا جهود الرئيس ترامب الذي منذ البداية أعلن عن أنه سيعقد صفقة سلام تاريخية في الشرق الأوسط، وكرر هذا الكلام أكثر من مرة في لقاءاتنا التي حصلت بيننا وبينه، سواء في واشنطن أو في الرياض أو في بيت لحم. نحن نؤكد على أن هذا الوفد أيضا يعمل من أجل السلام، ونحن سنعمل معه للوصول قريبا إن شاء الله لما سماه الرئيس ترامب بصفقة السلام. نعرف أن الأمور صعبة وأن الأمور معقدة، ولكن لا يوجد مستحيل أمام الجهود الطيبة. شكرا.
But less than 48 hours after the talks, things seem to have already gotten complicated. Arab media has reported that Kushner allegedly told President Abbas that halting settlement construction is impossible because it will cause the collapse of the Netanyahu government. The White House has already strongly denied these rumors, calling the comments total nonsense. As optimistic as we would like to be about possible peace talks, true peace will only come if both Israeli and Palestinian leaders can find terms to agree on, which means Kushner has his work cut out for him on this job.
Well, just after Jared Kushner's visit to the Holy Land, another delegate has landed in Israel, hoping to secure Middle East peace. It's United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres, who is now in Israel for his first visit as the sitting head of the UN. He'll be meeting with leaders on both sides of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Guterres began his trip with a tour of Israel's Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial, laying a wreath and proclaiming the UN's devotion to fight anti-Semitism and all forms of bigotry all over the world.
I'm fully committed to fight anti-Semitism, as to fight racism, xenophobia, anti-Muslim hatred, and all other forms of bigotry that unfortunately we were not yet able to make our world free of.
This visit comes at a critical time in the peace process, which has seen shifting alliances in the Arab world and growing threats to Israel from Iran and Hezbollah. Israeli leaders are hoping Guterres' trip will open his eyes to the security situation and improve what they feel is a long history of anti-Israel bias in the United Nations. One critical issue on the table for Israel is the upcoming vote on expanding UN troops in Lebanon, which Israel believes would be critical in keeping illegal weapons out of the hands of Hezbollah. The topic was at the top of Guterres' meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu today. But Guterres is also facing the dire situation in Gaza, which is faced with some of the worst conditions in years under Hamas rule. The UN chief will be speaking with both Israeli and Palestinian officials in hopes of easing the humanitarian crisis there, but cannot negotiate with Hamas directly. He may, however, be able to sway Hamas by putting pressure on Qatar, which already faces its own blockade of Middle East support. After meeting with Netanyahu, Guterres travels to Ramallah to sit with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas before continuing to Gaza in the next few days. As we all know, Jared Kushner recently led a U.S. peace envoy to meet with Israeli and Palestinian leaders. And now Prime Minister Netanyahu has just scheduled a one-on-one meeting with President Trump. The Israeli leader is about to leave for a trip to South America, which will mark the first ever visit of an Israeli prime minister to Latin America. And that's before he gives an annual speech at the United Nations in September. But now it looks like he'll be squeezing in one last big meeting before he heads back to Israel. The meeting will most likely take place at one of Trump's golf courses in New Jersey. But this won't be the first face-to-face between Trump and Netanyahu. They've met twice since Trump assumed office in January. But it does come at a delicate time in the Middle East peace process, and right after Jared Kushner reportedly reopened talks of moving the American embassy to Jerusalem. The embassy move was a critical talking point and something Trump famously promised in his campaign, but then he backtracked on last June, keeping the embassy in Tel Aviv. The White House faces a difficult dilemma with a potential embassy move, and though it would appease Israel, such an act would almost certainly jeopardize negotiations with the Palestinians. Trump's administration has already been on shaky ground there, with President Abbas questioning Trump's own White House turmoil as a threat to any peace talks. Jared Kushner's in the Middle East now after meeting with both Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. Clearly, he has his work cut out for him. We've been following all kinds of shifting alliances lately in the Palestinian world, but now it looks like a major deal has just gone down. Hamas has restored ties with Iran. And obviously, this has huge implications on Israel. The new head of Hamas has just announced that Iran will now be the largest backer of money and military aid to Hamas's army. And he didn't leave any shades of gray about what this partnership means. That the two are now pooling their resources to destroy Israel, saying they are, quote, developing our military strength in order to liberate Palestine. Hamas has been forced into a corner recently, with the Palestinian Authority cutting back major financial aid in hopes of brokering a new unity deal and placing Gaza back under President Abbas's control. But clearly Hamas has other things in mind. Meanwhile, another relationship is also quickly warming up between Turkey and the Palestinian Authority. Turkish President Erdogan has just met with President Abbas seeking a favorable solution to the Israeli-Palestinian dilemma.
أجريت اليوم محادثات مثمرة مع فخامة الأخ الرئيس أردوغان حول مختلف القضايا التي تهم البلدين، ووضعته في صورة آخر التطورات في منطقتنا، وبخاصة نتائج الزيارة الأخيرة للوفد الأمريكي والجهود الأمريكية بقيادة الرئيس ترامب من أجل صنع السلام بيننا وبين الإسرائيليين. ونحن من جانبنا نؤكد على التزامنا واستعدادنا لعقد صفقة سلام تاريخية تحت رعاية الرئيس ترامب.
Relations between Turkey and the PA stepped up following last month's crisis on the Temple Mount, which saw some of the bloodiest clashes between Israel and the Palestinians in years. President Erdogan is claiming that finding peace would benefit Israel as well, although just a few weeks ago he was condemning Israel's, quote, acts of aggression by placing metal detectors to deter terror at the Temple Mount. Clearly, major changes in the Palestinian world are underway, and Israel will need to be ready to answer. For nearly 2 years, Israeli Knesset members have been banned from visiting the Temple Mount. But today, the government decided to test out a one-day trial to allow them back, giving Israeli lawmakers a chance to enter the Temple Mount for the first time since 2015. With Jerusalem's Temple Mount at the focus of religious and political debate all over the world, it's been a source of conflict in the past for Israeli lawmakers to enter the holy site. Prime Minister Netanyahu placed a ban nearly 2 years ago on Knesset members from visiting the Temple Mount. At the time, he'd hoped the decision would calm escalating unrest in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. But now it looks like the government is dipping its toe into the waters and seeing if the conditions have cleared up for lawmakers to begin visiting once again. The Prime Minister has just made a one-day trial run, giving Knesset members their first glimpse of the Temple Mount in nearly 2 years. Though the trial was open to all members of the Knesset, only two, Yehuda Glick from the Likud party and Shuli Moalem from Habayit HaYehudi, came to participate. The members of the Joint Arab List party announced their refusal to the invitation, saying that they would enter the holy site whenever they wanted, not when Netanyahu decides. Israeli security will now analyze how the day's visit has affected security or stability in the region, with the potential of expanding the program and lifting the ban altogether. Well, on the heels of UN and American peace missions, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is taking a stand and declaring that the state of Israel will never evacuate another Jewish settlement. At a ceremony marking the 50th anniversary of Israel settling in the West Bank, Netanyahu proclaimed, "We're here to stay forever." The settlement issue has been at the center of peace talks since the beginning and continues to be a controversial point of debate. Netanyahu's pledge cements the state's claim to the disputed land, while Palestinians believe the nearly 500,000 Jews living there threaten any possibility of a future Palestinian state. In fact, the settlements are usually the central point of peace negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians, a question which has divided the international community. Just today, a group of Palestinian landowners and Israeli rights groups actually filed with the state to halt the construction of a new settlement, which was originally planned to service the families evacuated from the Amona outpost earlier this year. The Israeli government had actually doubled its budget recently to speed up the new settlement, but the new objection aims to bring things to a complete stop. Well, it looks like the Prime Minister is plowing ahead on Israel's commitment to expand Jewish homes into the West Bank on the very same day he slammed the head of the United Nations, who was in town to negotiate peace talks.
The mandate of the UN was to advance peace and security and international cooperation, and this is something that we seek to do, but I think objectively we can say that the UN has failed when it comes to Israel to live up to this mandate. The UN is mandated to preserve world heritage, but UNESCO, a world body, time and again makes a mockery of that heritage, most absurdly, when it denies the connection 3,000 years old of the Jewish people to our eternal capital, Jerusalem. The UN is mandated to pursue peace, but it allows Palestinian hate speech to flourish in its institutions. The UN is mandated to stand up for human rights, but it allows in its various forums the worst human rights violators to take up the cudgel and to accuse Israel of violating human rights.
It looks like Israel's taking a very hard line, hopefully one that can still lead to peace. The dilemma surrounding Israel's settlements in the West Bank has taken center stage this week, and there's just been a breaking development. Israel's defense minister has just declared the Jewish community of Hebron is officially gaining state recognition as an Israeli settlement. This news comes on the heels of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech on the matter, promising that the state would not evacuate any more settlements under his watch.
Zohi nachlat avotenu, zohi artzenu. חזרנו לכאן כדי להישאר לתמיד. לא תהיה יותר עקירה של יישובים בארץ ישראל. לא יעקרו יישובים. אגב, זה הוכח שזה לא עוזר לשלום. עקרנו יישובים. מה קיבלנו? קיבלנו טילים. ובכן, זה לא יהיה יותר.
The settlements have long been a major road bump in advancing peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians, since Palestinians believe this endangers any possibility for a future Palestinian state. The region has seen 2 peace envoys from the UN and the US over the last week, with the discussion of settlements at the top of everyone's list. But Team Trump remains unfazed by Netanyahu's commitment to expanding in the West Bank, even at the protest of the Palestinians. The White House is continuing to put together its peace plan. This upgrade of Hebron to official settlement status is a major shift in state policy, one that Israel hopes will bring Jewish life in Hebron to some kind of normalcy. Until now, the Jews living in Hebron have lived under the Palestinian Authority's municipality, served by the city's mayor, Sheikh Taysir Abu Sneineh, who served jail time for his role in murdering 6 Israelis in a terror attack. Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman's announcement means a major win for the 1,000 Jews living as a minority in Hebron, because now they'll be administered by Israel's civil administration. They hope this will bring in forced security and amenities to normalize their lives in a very stormy part of the world. Last month, the Israeli courts made a controversial and landmark decision to place even more barriers in front of same-sex couples trying to adopt children. But now the state has completely reversed its discriminatory position on the matter and is calling on the Knesset to amend the law and allow gay couples to adopt just like anyone else. When the High Court announced their verdict in July, it drew harsh criticism from rights groups all over the world. At the time, the government voiced total support for the decision, claiming that same-sex parents placed an additional burden on children. But just a few weeks later, in a shocking reversal, Israel's Welfare and Social Affairs Ministry has totally changed its stance. Welfare Minister Chaim Katz has just announced that there is no place for setting threshold conditions on adoptions, contrary to what the ministry said back in July. It's clear that the government is now recognizing the plight of same-sex couples in Israel who, for decades, have been struggling for equal rights under the law. Katz seems well aware of the discussion happening all over the country, saying that in these circumstances and in a matter that has such significant social implications in today's Israeli society, it appears that the proper place for further discussion of this issue is the legislature. Well, this is a major win for same-sex couples in Israel, and now the ball moves into the Knesset's court. Well, Israelis have been officially freaking out ever since the world's greatest ginger talk show host landed in the Holy Land. But now Conan O'Brien has just gotten maybe his most prestigious greeting yet from none other than Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Prime Minister Conan's in Israel.
Who?
Conan O'Brien, the late-night host.
Get back to me when Colbert is here.
But
Well, the Prime Minister tweeted his humorous hello to Team Coco, welcoming him to Israel amidst O'Brien's 5-day tour of the Holy Land. O'Brien is exploring Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Bethlehem, taping his latest Conan Without Borders TV special after promising to help Jared Kushner broker peace in the Middle East. But now it looks like Conan's really taken this mission to heart, sitting down for a very serious one-on-one session with the Israeli Prime Minister himself.
Here's sit. You must sit. You must sit. There you go. Here's the difference between this dog and an American dog. No American dog is satisfied with a cucumber. They want 2 cucumbers. You,
Sure.
what is this? No,
Meet Kaya. She's paler than you.
yeah, paler than me. This dog. If you tried to give an American dog a cucumber, it would punch you.
Kaya? Kaya?
Well, they're clearly getting up to serious thing. O'Brien's taken his antics all over the country, talking with Israelis in Jerusalem and even stopping to visit the Western Wall. Live tweeting his adventures along the way, Conan's been haggling for deals in the markets of Old Jerusalem, hitting the Chuka in Bethlehem, and even crashing an Israeli high schoolers' hackathon event in the David Museum. This is day 4 of Conan's 5-day visit, which means, unfortunately, Israelis only have one more day to get their selfies.
All right, and now with the latest top 5 is ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh. Take it away, Emmanuel.
Looking for an outdoor adventure on your trip to Israel? Well, Israel has it all. Breathtaking nature, rich ancient history, and rare wildlife. So here are the top 5 nature reserves in Israel. Makhtesh Ramon, or the Ramon crater located in the Negev Desert, is the largest natural crater in the world. The waters of an ocean that covered the area over 200 years ago began to recede, eventually forming the 40-kilometer crater. Go for the diverse wildlife, but you'll stay for the view. Gamla Nature Reserve is set high in the Golan Heights and is a magical place to hike, see archaeological ruins, eagle's nests, and breathtaking views. It's home to over 80 10 feet in length vultures who soar above you and cast a shadow. Oh, and just a 45-minute trail leads you to the 170-foot Gamla waterfall. So whether you have a hectic itinerary or can spare the entire day, either way, it's definitely worth a stop. Located on the eastern edge of the Judean desert and overlooking the Dead Sea is the Masada National Park, an ancient fortification with an endless amount of history and, well, after the hike is absolutely stunning view, Masada symbolizes the ancient kingdom of Israel and its violent destruction and exile at the end of the 1st century. The outstanding universal value of Masada led to its inscription in 2001 as UNESCO World Heritage Site. So, what are you waiting for? A 3,000-acre breeding and re-acclimation center, also known as the Hebron Nature Reserve, is 4th on our list. Locally extinct and endangered animals mentioned in the Bible are bred here for potential reintroduction into the Negev Desert. Some rare desert animals not native to Israel are also found here, such as the red-necked ostrich from northern Africa. Definitely a must-see. Located in Haifa are the Baha'i Gardens, which are around the shrine of the Bab on Mount Carmel. The gardens cover around 200,000 square meters of land, and downhill are the Monument Gardens, which holds the grave of some of the members of the Baha'i Holy Family. A stunning scenic drive leads to an absolute breathtaking view. Stay tuned for our next top 5. Back to you.
That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of This Week in Israel. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.